I was folding laundry in my small living room when my son called, the Thursday before his 36th birthday, late afternoon light slanting through windows I'd cleaned that morning. My house in Chicago's South Side wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, outdated kitchen, furniture I'd owned for 20 years, but it was paid off and mine, or at least, that's what everyone thought. Mom, Derek's voice came through the phone, sharp and impatient. No greeting, no warmth, just my title, wielded like an obligation. I got your message about dinner next week. If you're watching, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where in the world you're from. I thought we could do something simple for your birthday, I said, keeping my voice light despite the familiar weight settling in my chest. I could make your favorite, pot roast, mashed potatoes, that chocolate cake you used to love. That's exactly what I'm calling about. He cut me off the way he always did, like my words were obstacles to clear rather than communications to receive. I don't want to do dinner. I'm busy with work. And honestly, Mom, these obligatory birthday things are exhausting. I sat down on the couch I'd bought secondhand 15 years ago, the springs protesting under my weight. Through the window, I could see Mrs. Washington across the street watering her roses. Normal life, continuing around me while mine contracted into this phone call. It's not obligatory, sweetheart. I'm your mother. I want to celebrate. That's the problem. His voice rose, frustration bleeding into something harder. You always want something, want to celebrate, want to help, want to be involved. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is? How much of a burden you are? The word hit like a slap. Burden. I was a burden to the son I'd raised alone after his father died when Derek was 12. The son I'd worked double shifts to put through college and law school. The son whose apartment I'd co-signed for even though I could have bought it outright with cash he didn't know I had. Derek, I don't understand. I've never asked you for anything. You ask for everything. Your guilt trips about not visiting enough. Your sad little birthday dinners in this depressing house. Your constant neediness disguised as concern. It's suffocating. He was on a roll now. Years of resentment pouring out like poison. And financially? Don't even get me started. I'm still paying you back for the apartment deposit, dealing with you calling about the co-signing paperwork, listening to you worry about money like it's my problem. I never said it was your problem, I interrupted quietly. I was just sharing. That's the thing, Mom. I don't want you to share. I don't want these conversations. I don't want to pretend I'm excited about pot roast in your sad house. You want to know what would be the best birthday present? The absolute best gift you could give me? Something in his tone made me grip the phone tighter, some instinct warning me that whatever came next would change everything. What? I whispered. If you just died. He said it clearly, coldly, with the precision of a man used to delivering verdicts. If you simply ceased to exist, stopped being this weight around my neck, this obligation I have to manage, this embarrassment I have to explain, my life would be perfect, Mom. Absolutely perfect. If you just weren't in it anymore. The silence that followed felt like falling, like the moment between losing your footing and hitting the ground, when you know impact is coming, but haven't felt it yet. Derek, I started, but he was already talking over me. I know that sounds harsh, but someone needs to be honest with you. You're 61 years old. You live in this tiny house, barely scraping by on your pension, still trying to be relevant in a life that moved on without you. Dad's been dead for 5 years. I'm grown. You have no purpose anymore except to burden the people who are actually doing something with their lives. I should have screamed at him, should have defended myself, pointed out every sacrifice I'd made, every time I'd chosen his needs over mine. Should have told him I wasn't poor, wasn't struggling, wasn't any of the things he assumed. Instead, I said very quietly, I understand. If you're watching, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where in the world you're from. Good. So we're skipping the birthday dinner. I'll call you next month sometime. He hung up before I could respond. I sat holding my phone in the fading afternoon light, and something inside me that had been bending for 36 years finally snapped. Not broke. Broke implied damage, injury, something that needed fixing. This was different. This was clarity. My son wanted me dead, wanted me gone, wanted his life to be free of the burden of my existence. And I was going to give him exactly what he asked for, not in the way he'd be expecting, not in any way he could have imagined. Because Derek had made one critical miscalculation in his cruel little speech about my sad, poor, burdensome life. He had no idea who I actually was, what I actually had, what he was about to lose. I walked to my bedroom, opened the closet, moved aside the box of old photo albums, and pulled out the fireproof safe I'd kept hidden for 5 years. Inside, bank statements showing balances Derek had never seen. investment portfolios he didn't know existed, the documentation of a fortune built by his father and inherited by me, carefully hidden and preserved. $8.5 million, hidden from a son I'd been testing, waiting to see if he'd develop character, integrity, the values that would make him worthy of inheriting wealth he'd never had to work for. He'd failed the test spectacularly. And now? Now he was going to learn exactly what it cost to tell your mother you wished she was dead. I pulled out my laptop and started making calls. My lawyer first, then my financial advisor, then the real estate agent who'd been trying to buy my house for 3 years. Derek wanted me dead? Fine. As of tomorrow morning, the mother he knew would cease to exist, and when he realized what he'd lost, when he finally understood the magnitude of his cruelty, it would be too late. The greatest gift I could give him for his birthday was exactly what he'd asked for: freedom from his burden of a mother. He just had no idea how much that freedom was going to cost him. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my small kitchen table with my laptop, a pot of coffee, and 5 years of carefully hidden financial documents spread out like evidence at a trial. Because that's what this was, really. The trial of Derek Michael Carter, age 35, charged with cruelty and convicted by his own words. The documents told a story Derek had never bothered to learn. His father, James, had been more than the insurance agent Derek remembered. James had been brilliant with investments, particularly in tech stocks in the early 2000s. While working his modest day job, he'd been building a portfolio that grew exponentially. Apple at $15 a share, Amazon at $40, Google's IPO. Small, consistent investments that exploded in value. When James died 5 years ago, sudden heart attack, no warning, no goodbye. I'd inherited everything. The house was paid off, the investments mature, plus the surprise inheritance from my Aunt Louise, who died 6 months after James. Louise, who'd never married, never had children, who'd left her entire estate to her favorite niece, who'd visited every Sunday and actually listened. Total, $8.5 million. I'd told Derek about his father's death, the funeral, the grief. I'd never told him about the money. That had been deliberate. I'd wanted to see what kind of man my son would become without the corrupting knowledge of guaranteed wealth. Would he work hard, develop empathy, build character, or would he become entitled, lazy, cruel? The apartment I'd co-signed for, I could have bought it outright for cash. The loans he'd asked for over the years, I'd tracked every dollar, noting he'd never paid back a cent. The modest house I lived in, a choice, not a necessity. I could have bought a mansion. Instead, I'd maintained the fiction of being a struggling widow on a pension, testing whether my son would help or abandon the mother he thought was poor. He'd chosen abandonment. Worse, he'd chosen cruelty. At 6 a.m., I called my lawyer, Richard Morrison. We'd worked together for 3 years, updating my will annually, preparing for the day I'd reveal the truth to Derek. That day was supposed to come when he proved himself worthy. Marriage to a good woman, maybe. Grandchildren. Some evidence of depth and character beyond his corporate lawyer persona. Vivian, it's early. Everything okay? Richard's voice was warm with concern. I need to change my will. Today. Completely. Pause. What happened? I told him. About the phone call, the words Derek had used, the way he'd said them without hesitation or regret. Richard listened in silence. Jesus, Vivian. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be available. I need you to revise everything. Derek gets $1 in a letter. Everything else, all $8.5 million, gets divided between charities, the Nursing Scholarship Fund, Children's Hospital, domestic violence shelters, organizations that actually help people instead of calling them burdens. Are you sure? That's a significant decision to make when you're emotional. I've never been more clear-headed in my life, Richard. My son told me his life would be perfect if I was dead. I'm giving him exactly that, a life without his mother. He just doesn't get to have my money, too. Can you do this today? I'll have the documents ready by noon. But Vivian, you should think about noon. I'll be there. I hung up before he could counsel caution I didn't want. Next call, Sarah Chen, my financial advisor. Sarah had managed my investments for 4 years, turning James's good work into something extraordinary. She'd been after me to upgrade my lifestyle, questioned why I lived so modestly when I didn't have to. Now you'll understand, I told her after explaining the situation. I need to liquidate some assets. I'm moving. New city, new life, and I need to set up the charitable trusts immediately. How much are we moving? Everything that's not already in locked investments. Maybe $2 million? I'll need it mobile, accessible. I'm disappearing, Sarah. Completely. Disappearing? Vivian, you're not talking about... I'm talking about starting over. Clean slate. New name if I can manage it legally. Derek wants me dead? Fine. Vivian Carter, struggling widow. will cease to exist, and he'll learn exactly what he lost. Sarah was quiet for a moment. You know what? Good for you. I've watched you minimize yourself for years for that boy. Time he learned some consequences. I'll start the paperwork. Where are you thinking of going? Portland. I've always wanted to see Oregon, and it's far enough that Derek won't accidentally run into me. Portland's expensive. Sarah, I'm a multimillionaire. I think I can afford Portland. We both laughed, and it felt good. Better than I'd felt in years. By 10 a.m., I'd done the impossible. Listed my house with cash buyer who'd been pestering me for years, scheduled movers for the weekend, and contacted the co-signing bank about Derek's apartment. That last call was particularly satisfying. Mrs. Carter, if you withdraw as co-signer, Mr. Carter will need to refinance or face foreclosure. Are you sure? I'm very sure. Start the paperwork. He has 30 days' notice as of today. May I ask why the sudden change? My son wished I was dead. I'm granting his wish. He gets independence. Complete, total independence. The bank representative was silent. Then, I'll process this immediately. The final piece was the hardest, the letter I'd leave for Derek. I worked on it all morning, deleting and rewriting, trying to find words that captured the enormity of what he'd done and what he'd lost. Dear Derek, you said your life would be perfect if I died. Consider your wish granted. What you don't know, what you never bothered to ask or notice, is that I'm not the poor, struggling widow you thought you were burdened with. I'm a multi-millionaire, have been since your father died. $8.5 million in investments. Inheritance, assets carefully hidden and preserved. I hid it deliberately. I wanted to see what kind of man you'd become without the corruption of guaranteed wealth. Would you be kind, generous? Would you help your supposedly struggling mother? Or would you be cruel? You chose cruelty. While you called me a burden, I could have bought your apartment 10 times over. While you complained about my sad little house, I was sitting on a fortune. While you wished I was dead, I was planning to leave everything to you, eventually. When you proved yourself worthy, you proved the opposite. So here's your birthday present, son. I'm disappearing completely. You'll never see me again, and you'll never see a single cent of the money that could have been yours. All $8.5 million goes to charity, organizations that help people instead of calling them burdens. You inherit exactly $1 and this letter. Your life is now perfect, just like you wanted. You're free of your poor, needy, embarrassing mother. I hope it's everything you wished for. Goodbye, Derek. You killed our relationship with your words. I'm just making it official. Vivian. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of sadness, tears of rage, of liberation, of power reclaimed. Then I printed it, sealed it in an envelope, and set it aside. At noon, I met Richard at his office and signed the new will. Everything legally airtight, impossible to contest. Derek got his dollar. The world got the rest. By evening, I'd accepted the cash offer on my house, closing in 2 weeks, had movers scheduled, had Portland apartment virtually toured and deposit paid. In 7 days, Vivian Carter would cease to exist in Chicago, and Derek would come home to his birthday present, the truth of what he'd lost, and a life exactly as empty as he'd wished for. I fell asleep that night, not in grief, but in anticipation, not ending my life, but beginning it. At 61, I was about to be reborn, and my son was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. The next 7 days moved with the strange velocity of purposeful destruction. Not destroying myself, destroying the fiction I'd maintained for 5 years. Vivian Carter, the struggling widow, was being systematically erased. Friday morning, I started with the apartment. Derek still had my key from when he'd needed it for emergencies. Emergencies that always involved borrowing something, never helping with something. I let myself in at 10 a.m., knowing he'd be at work, billing hours to clients he probably overcharged. The apartment was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive minimalism, like a hotel room occupied by someone who confused possessions with personality. Leather couch that cost more than my monthly pension. Art on the walls, prints, not originals, but in frames meant to suggest wealth. Kitchen so clean it was obvious he never cooked, just ordered from restaurants and left the boxes for housekeeping he couldn't really afford. I'd co-signed for this, made his $4,000 monthly mortgage possible. My name on the loan meant his mediocre credit and high debt-to-income ratio didn't matter. The bank had my assets, the ones Derek didn't know existed, as backup. Not anymore. I took photos of everything, not sentimentality, evidence. Then I left the envelope on his kitchen island, propped against the expensive espresso machine I'd bought him last Christmas. The envelope contained my letter, the foreclosure notice from the bank, and one more thing, a flash drive. The flash drive held screenshots, Every text message where he'd asked for money and promised to pay it back. Bank records showing he never had. Credit reports showing the accounts he'd opened using my information as co-signer without asking first. Technically fraud, though I'd never pursued it because he was my son, and I'd been hoping he'd grow up. He'd grown up all right, into exactly the kind of person I'd hoped he wouldn't become. I locked the door behind me and dropped the key in his mailbox. Wouldn't be needing it anymore. Saturday was the hardest, telling the truth to the only friend who knew part of it. Marlene Thompson and I had been nursing colleagues for 15 years before we both retired. She was the one person who knew I wasn't actually struggling, though even she didn't know the full amount. "You're really doing this?" she asked over coffee at her kitchen table. "Just disappearing?" "He told me he wished I was dead, Mar." Not in anger, coldly, calculatedly, like he'd been thinking about it for years and finally found the courage to say it. Marlene's dark eyes flashed with fury. "That entitled little shit. After everything you've done, that's exactly it. Everything I've done kept him from becoming someone who'd deserve what I had to give." I wrapped my hands around my mug, needing the warmth. "I enabled him by trying to teach him, made him dependent while pretending to make him independent. This is on me too. Don't you dare take responsibility for his cruelty. I'm not, but I am taking responsibility for stopping it, for choosing me." I looked at my oldest friend. "I need you to do something. In a few weeks, Derek's going to try to find me. He'll call, come by, eventually hire investigators. I need you to tell him I'm gone. That's it. No details, no forwarding information, just gone. You trust me with this? You're the only one I trust." I pulled out an envelope. "Not for Derek, for her. This has my new contact information. Don't use it unless it's an actual emergency." Not Derek asking questions. Actual emergency. She took it, held it like the lifeline it was. "What about your house?" "Closing in 10 days. Cash buyer. Taking almost nothing with me. Just clothes, photos, documents. Everything else goes to charity or trash. I'm not dragging my old life into my new one." Jesus, Vivian. This is really happening. It really is. I smiled, and it felt genuine for the first time in days. I'm 61 years old, and I've spent the last 5 years play-acting poverty to test my son's character. He failed. Now, I get to live the life I've been deferring. "Where are you going?" "Better you don't know. That way you can't accidentally tell him." She nodded, understanding. "You're going to be okay, right? You're not doing anything." "I'm not doing anything except finally living, Marlene. For the first time in 36 years, I'm choosing me. That's not giving up. That's waking up." We hugged goodbye on her porch, both crying, both knowing this was an ending and a beginning. She'd been witness to so much of my life. Now she'd be witness to its transformation. Sunday through Wednesday blurred together. Movers, donations, shredding documents, closing accounts. The physical dismantling of a life. Each box packed was weight removed. Each donation dropped off was attachment released. The house I'd lived in for 20 years emptied around me like a shell I was outgrowing. The kitchen where I'd made 1,000 dinners for a son who now wished me dead. The living room where we'd watched movies before he'd decided I was too boring for his time. The bedroom I'd shared with James before cancer took him and left me alone with Derek's future. All of it, released. Thursday, I went to the courthouse. Changing your name legally isn't as hard as people think. Just tedious. Paperwork, fees, a judge who asked exactly 2 questions. "Are you doing this to avoid debts or criminal charges?" And "Are you sure?" "No debts, no charges. And I'm absolutely sure, Your Honor." She signed the order. Vivian Marie Carter became Vivian M. Lawrence, my mother's maiden name, connecting me to lineage that preceded my marriage and motherhood. A name Derek wouldn't think to search. Friday morning, exactly 1 week after Derek's phone call, I stood in my empty house taking one last walk through. Floors I'd mopped, walls I'd painted, windows I'd cleaned. A house that had been full and was now empty, like my relationship with my son. My phone rang. Derek. Right on schedule. He always called Friday evenings, his weekly obligation discharge. I let it go to voicemail, listened to his message. "Mom, it's me. Just checking in. Work's been crazy. Maybe we can grab lunch next week? Call me back." The casual cruelty of it. 1 week after wishing me dead, calling like nothing had happened, like his words had evaporated instead of detonating everything. I deleted the voicemail without responding. Saturday morning, the moving truck took the few things I was keeping to storage until the Portland apartment was ready. That afternoon, my realtor handed me a check that would have seemed enormous to the person Derek thought I was. To the person I actually was, it was simply converting one asset into another. Saturday night, I stayed in a hotel near O'Hare, my last night in Chicago. Couldn't sleep. Lay awake thinking about Derek coming home Monday, his birthday, to discover what he'd lost. Sunday, I boarded a plane, one-way ticket to Portland, first class, because why not? I'd been living small for 5 years, time to occupy the space I could actually afford. As the plane lifted off, I looked down at Chicago disappearing below, the city where I'd raised my son, buried my husband, hidden my fortune, and finally chosen myself. Somewhere down there, Derek was enjoying his last days of ignorance. Monday morning, he'd come home to his birthday present, and the real gift, the greatest gift, would be watching what he did when he finally understood what he'd lost. I ordered champagne from the flight attendant and toasted myself at 30,000 feet. Happy birthday, Derek. Welcome to the perfect life you wished for. I was unpacking boxes in my new Portland apartment when it happened. Monday morning, 9:47 a.m. Pacific time, which meant 11:47 in Chicago. Derek would be at work, probably in some meeting, billing hours, but his lunch break was coming. I'd timed it perfectly. My new apartment was small but lovely. 1 bedroom in the Pearl District, exposed brick, huge windows overlooking the city. 6 months' rent paid in advance because I was done pretending I couldn't. Furniture was being delivered tomorrow. For now, I had an air mattress, some unpacked boxes, and my laptop set up on the kitchen counter. I was checking email when my old phone, the one I'd kept active for exactly this purpose, started ringing. Derek. I let it go to voicemail. Waited. It rang again immediately. Voicemail. Again, voicemail. Then the text started. Mom, where are you? Mom, call me immediately. What the fuck is this letter? You need to call me now. Is this some kind of joke? I watched them come in like incoming fire, each one more desperate than the last. Didn't respond to any of them. At 12:15 my time, he called again. This time I answered, putting it on speaker so I could continue unpacking while he discovered consequences. What the fuck, Mom? He was yelling before I could even say hello. What is this insane letter? Where are you? Your house is empty. Your number's been going to voicemail. Hello, Derek. Happy birthday. The silence was sharp enough to cut. Then, are you serious right now? You disappeared, left this completely insane letter about millions of dollars, and you're wishing me happy birthday? You said your life would be perfect if I died. I'm helping you achieve that perfection. I kept my voice calm, almost cheerful. How does it feel so far? How does it... Mom, you can't just disappear. We need to talk about this. This letter, these accusations. Accusations? I interrupted. Derek, everything in that letter is documented truth. The screenshots of you asking for loans you never repaid are on the flash drive. The credit report showing accounts you opened using my information is there too. The bank confirmation of the foreclosure notice on your apartment, that was sent to you separately. Which part are you calling an accusation? The part about you being a multimillionaire. He practically screamed it. That's insane. You live in that tiny house. You're always worried about money. I lived modestly. I never said I was worried about money. You assumed. And I let you assume because I was testing you. I opened a box marked kitchen and started putting away dishes. I wanted to see what kind of man you'd become without the corruption of guaranteed wealth. Whether you'd be kind, generous, helpful to your supposedly struggling mother. This is manipulative as hell, is it? You had every opportunity to be a good son without any promise of inheritance. You chose cruelty instead. That's on you, not me. I could hear him breathing hard, trying to control his rage. Okay, let's say this is all true. Let's say you somehow have millions. You're really going to disinherit your only son over one angry phone call? One angry phone call? I laughed, and it sounded bitter even to me. Derek, you told me your life would be perfect if I died. You said I was a burden, an embarrassment, a weight around your neck. You said you wished I didn't exist. Those aren't words that slip out in anger. Those are truths you've been thinking for years. I was stressed. I didn't mean... You meant every word. That's what made it so clear. You weren't yelling, weren't emotional. You were calm, factual, delivering a verdict you'd clearly been rehearsing. I found my coffee maker, started setting it up. And you know what? I'm grateful. Because you finally told me the truth about what you really think of me. Now I can act accordingly. By abandoning me? By cutting me off? No, Derek. By giving you exactly what you asked for. You wanted freedom from your burden of a mother? You have it. Complete freedom. You'll never see me again. Never have to take my calls. Never have to endure my sad little birthday dinners. Your life gets to be perfect now. What about the money? You're really leaving it all to charity? And there it was. Not, what about our relationship? Or, how do I fix this? Or, I'm sorry for what I said. Just, what about the money? Every cent goes to organizations that help people instead of calling them burdens. Nursing scholarships, children's hospitals, domestic violence shelters. People who'll actually appreciate it. You can't do this. His voice had gone cold, calculating. Lawyer mode. I'll contest the will. Undue influence, mental incompetence, something. You don't just get to disinherit your child. Actually, I do. Check with your lawyer friends. Illinois law doesn't require parents to leave anything to adult children. My will is airtight. Richard Morrison drafted it, and he's better at his job than you'll ever be at yours. You can contest if you want. You'll lose, waste money you don't have on lawyers, and still end up with exactly $1. $1. He repeated it like he was testing whether it was real. You're leaving me $1. That's $1 more than you deserve. Be grateful I didn't charge you for the 36 years I spent raising you. This is insane. You've lost your mind. When people find out about this, who's going to tell them? You? You'll have to admit you told your mother you wished she was dead and she took you seriously. How do you think that'll play at your law firm? With your friends? With whatever women you're dating? I paused. Or you could just let it go. Accept that you destroyed this relationship yourself. Learn from it. Become a better person. Novel concept, I know. He was breathing hard again. I could picture him in his office, probably red-faced, drawing stares from colleagues through his glass wall. Where are you? He asked finally. We need to talk about this face-to-face. You can't just run away. Watch me. I'm done being available for your convenience, Derek. Done being the mother you wish was dead. From now on, that wish is granted. Goodbye. I hung up while he was mid-sentence, blocked his number. Then, for good measure, blocked every social media platform, every email address, every possible avenue of contact. The phone rang immediately from a different number, probably his cell instead of office line. I turned the phone completely off. Silence. Glorious, liberating silence. I made coffee in my new kitchen, stood at my new windows, looking out at my new city where nobody knew me as Derek Carter's mother. Just Vivian Lawrence, woman with resources and freedom, and a life ahead of her that belonged entirely to herself. My email pinged. Derek had found my email address, was sending paragraphs of rage and justification and threats. I marked it as spam without reading past the first line. He'd figure it out eventually. That I was serious. That this wasn't a negotiation or a manipulation or a test he could pass with the right apology. That he'd taken the love of his only parent and thrown it away for nothing. And now he'd live with that emptiness forever. I hoped it haunted him, hoped he woke up every day for the rest of his life and remembered the $8.5 million he'd lost with 6 words. My life would be perfect if you just died. 6 words that cost him a fortune. 6 words that freed me completely. I raised my coffee mug to the Portland skyline and smiled. Happy birthday, Derek. Welcome to Perfect. 3 days after I'd disappeared, Marlene called my new number, the emergency line. He's unraveling, she said without preamble. Came by my house this morning at 7 a.m. I've never seen him like this. I was at IKEA, of all places, buying furniture for my apartment like a normal person, starting a normal life. Tell me. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Asked if I knew where you were, said you'd disappeared, and he was worried. I told him what you told me to say, that you'd moved and didn't leave a forwarding address. Vivian. He started crying, actually crying on my front porch. Something in my chest tightened. Not sympathy, I'd cauterized that wound, but acknowledgement that this was real, happening, irreversible. What did he say? That he'd made a terrible mistake, that he'd said things he didn't mean, that he just needed to talk to you, explain, fix it. Marlene paused. I told him some things can't be fixed, that words have consequences. He said he understood that now. Said he'd do anything to make it right. Asked if there was any way I could get a message to you. And you said? I said, even if I could, I wouldn't. That you'd made your choice, and he needed to respect it. Another pause. Longer. He didn't take that well. Define, not well. Punched my porch railing hard enough to split his knuckles. Started yelling about how this was insane. How you'd stolen millions that should be his. How he was going to find you and make you see reason. Marlene's voice hardened. I told him to get off my property before I called the police. He left. But Vivian? He's not giving up. He's obsessed. After we hung up, I sat in my car in the IKEA parking lot and let myself feel it. Not regret. I'd make the same choice again. But grief for what could have been if Derek had been different. If he'd been the son I'd hoped to raise, instead of the man he'd chosen to become. My phone buzzed. Email from Richard Morrison, my lawyer. Vivian. Derek hired an attorney. They're threatening to contest the will on grounds of undue influence and mental incompetence. It won't work. I told you the will is airtight, but prepare for him to fight this. Also, he filed a missing persons report. Chicago PD called me as your attorney of record. I explained, you're not missing. You relocated voluntarily, and as an adult, you have that right. They closed the case, but he's escalating. Be careful. I forwarded the email to Sarah Chen, my financial advisor, with a note. Lock everything down. Make sure Derek can't access any information about my accounts, location, or assets. Full privacy protocols. Her response came within minutes. Already done. Also, FYI, Derek called my office yesterday claiming to be your son and saying you were incapacitated. Reception hung up on him. We've flagged his name in our system. He can't get past the front desk. Derek was hunting me, using every resource, every connection, every manipulation he could think of. The son who'd said his life would be perfect without me was now destroying that life trying to find me. The irony was almost beautiful. Over the next 2 weeks, the reports from Chicago came in steady waves. From Marlene, he's hiring private investigators, showed up at the hospital asking nurses if anyone had heard from you. They're all pissed. Turns out he was never as charming as he thought, and people remember how he treated you. From Richard, the will contest was dismissed with prejudice. Judge called it a grown man's temper tantrum over consequences he earned. Derek's lawyer withdrew from the case. I don't think he'll find another one willing to waste time on this. From Sarah, he somehow got to my personal cell number, called at 11 p.m., saying he knew I was hiding information about his mother's whereabouts and threatening to report me for elder abuse. I reported him to the Bar Association for harassment. They're opening an ethics inquiry. Each update painted the same picture. Derek spiraling, losing sleep, losing control, losing the calculated composure that had always been his armor. Good. I was settling into Portland like a plant finally finding the right soil. Joined a book club at Powell's Books, started volunteering at OHSU Hospital. Nursing skills don't expire, and it felt good to be useful again on my own terms. Took a cooking class and learned to make pasta from scratch. Small joys I'd denied myself while play-acting poverty and hoping my son would grow a conscience. 1 month after I'd left, I was having coffee at a cafe downtown when my emergency phone rang again. Marlene. He found your house sale records, she said. Knows you got $320,000 for it. Now he's convinced that's part of the millions you supposedly have, and he's owed some of it. I laughed, couldn't help it. He thinks 300,000 is millions? He has no concept of the actual amount. How much are we talking? 8.5 million, give or take. Jesus Christ! Marlene was quiet, and he lost all of that because he couldn't keep his mouth shut for 5 more minutes. Not 5 minutes, 5 years. If he'd been decent for 5 years, been a good son, showed some character, I'd have told him about it when he turned 40, would have set him up for life. Instead, I watched rain streak down the cafe window. Instead, he told me he wished I was dead and lost everything. Has he tried to contact you directly? Can't. I blocked everything. Changed my number, legally changed my name. He's looking for Vivian Carter. She doesn't exist anymore. Us? What name are you using? Better you don't know. That way, if he asks, you can honestly say you don't. 6 weeks after I'd vanished, Derek apparently showed up at Richard Morrison's office and had to be escorted out by security. Richard called to tell me. He demanded to know where you were, said he had a right to see his mother. I told him you'd made it clear you wanted no contact and he needed to respect that. He said, and I quote, "She can't do this. That money is mine. Not I miss my mother or I want to apologize. Just that the money is his." Did you tell him he'd never see a cent? I told him that ship had sailed, burned, and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. He's threatening to sue me now for conspiracy or some nonsense. I'm not worried. But Vivian? He's not stable. If he does find you, he won't. I'm careful. And honestly, Richard, let him look. Let him exhaust himself, hunting for a woman who doesn't exist anymore. It's the closest thing to justice I'll get for 36 years of being taken for granted. 3 months in, Derek hired his 4th private investigator. This one was apparently better than the others. Found that I'd taken a flight to Portland the day I'd disappeared. But Portland was a big city, and Vivian Lawrence was a needle in a haystack to someone looking for Vivian Carter. I read the report Marlene forwarded me. The PI had interviewed her, gotten nowhere, concluded I'd likely left Portland for somewhere else, and was just using it as a waypoint. Derek paid him $5,000 for that useless conclusion. $5,000 he didn't have. I knew this because Richard had found out Derek was drowning financially, lost the apartment to foreclosure. took out high-interest loans to fund his search for me, fell behind on credit card. His law firm put him on probation for personal issues affecting work quality. Everything was collapsing for him, and I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not pity, just the distant acknowledgement that consequences were happening to someone who'd earned them. At night, in my comfortable bed in my chosen city, I sometimes thought about Derek as a child, the sweet boy who'd held my hand crossing streets, who'd cried when his goldfish died, who'd told me I was the best mom in the world. When had that boy disappeared? When had he been replaced by the man who wished me dead? I didn't know. Maybe it was gradual, imperceptible until it was too late. Maybe I'd enabled it by loving him too much, giving too freely, never requiring him to develop empathy because mine was always available. It didn't matter now. That boy was gone. The man who remained had made his choices, and I'd made mine. I was free, finally, completely free. And Derek was learning that some words, once spoken, can never be taken back, that some doors, once closed, don't reopen, that some fortunes, once lost, are gone forever. Happy hunting, son. I hope the search haunts you forever. 6 months after my disappearance, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror barely recognizing myself. I'd let my hair grow out, no more tight, pragmatic bun, but soft curls around my shoulders, bought clothes that fit well and made me feel beautiful instead of invisible. Lost weight not from stress, but from hiking the trails around Portland every morning, from joy instead of anxiety. I looked happy, younger, free. Vivian Lawrence was everything Vivian Carter had been denied: visible, present, living. My doorbell rang. Margaret Chen, my neighbor from 2 floors down. We'd met in the building's community garden and bonded over tomatoes and shared widowhood. She was 70, hilarious, and had no idea about my past because I'd never told her. "Farmer's market?" she called through the door. "I'm buying too many vegetables and need someone to share the guilt." This was my life now. Farmers markets and book clubs and volunteering at the hospital, dinner parties with new friends who knew me as Vivian, the retired nurse who'd moved from Illinois for a fresh start. Not as Derek's mother, not as anyone's burden, just as myself. We walked through the Pearl District, Margaret chattering about her grandchildren visiting next month, me half listening and half marveling at how normal this felt, how easy it was to be a person when you weren't performing sacrifice. "You're different," Margaret said suddenly. "From when you moved in, I mean. Lighter." "I left some heavy things behind," I said carefully. "Good. Life's too short to carry weight that isn't yours." She squeezed my arm. "Whatever you walked away from, I'm glad you did." We bought strawberries and fresh bread, coffee from a vendor who remembered my order, flowers for both our apartments, small pleasures that felt enormous after years of self-imposed deprivation. Back home, I checked my secure email, the one only Marlene, Richard, and Sarah knew about. 3 messages from Marlene. "Derek came by again. Asked if I'd heard from you. I said no, which is technically true since you emailed me, not called. He looks terrible. Lost weight, hasn't been sleeping. Said he's in therapy now, trying to understand what he did wrong. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost." From Richard. "Good news. Derek's attempts to locate you have apparently exhausted his finances. His lawyer in the will contest matter withdrew. He's drowning in debt and can't afford to keep searching. Nature is healing." From Sarah. "Your investments continue performing beautifully. You're up another $340,000 this quarter. Also, I set up the charitable foundation you wanted, the Vivian Lawrence Foundation for Nursing Excellence. First scholarships will be awarded next fall. Derek will never know it exists, but his loss is funding the next generation of nurses. Poetic justice." I sat with these messages, feeling the weight of them. Derek was suffering, broke, probably desperate, in therapy confronting his own cruelty. Part of me, the mother part that never quite dies, wanted to reach out, tell him I was okay, release him from whatever guilt was eating him. But the larger part, the part that had survived his words and chosen herself, knew better. Reaching out would teach him nothing except that cruelty could be forgiven if he suffered enough afterward. That wasn't the lesson he needed. The lesson was, some damage is permanent. Some words can't be unsaid. Some relationships, once destroyed, stay destroyed. I deleted the emails and went to make dinner. That evening, my book club met at Powell's. 8 women, ages 57 to 74, who'd all found each other through a love of literary fiction and shared life experience. We were reading Circe by Madeline Miller, a story about a woman exiled from her family, finding power in isolation. The parallels weren't lost on me. "What do you think Circe gained from her exile?" asked Linda, our de facto moderator. "Freedom," I said immediately. Her family was toxic. Getting away from them, even involuntarily, let her become who she actually was instead of who they needed her to be. But she was lonely, countered Beth. She missed human connection. She was alone, I corrected. Not the same as lonely. She built a life that was hers. That's worth some solitude. We debated this for an hour, dissecting myth and meaning, and I realized I was describing my own life, exiled from Derek, though I'd been the one to leave, finding power, not despite the separation, but because of it. Walking home, Linda caught up with me. You okay? You seemed emotional during the discussion. I'm good. The book just hits close to home. Bad family? Complicated family. I had a son who, we're not in contact anymore. Linda nodded like she understood. I haven't spoken to my daughter in 3 years. She chose her abusive husband over her mother. Some days I miss her. Most days, I'm relieved I don't have to watch her self-destruct anymore. Do you regret cutting contact? No. I regret that it was necessary, but the actual cutting? She shook her head. That saved my life. Sometimes love means walking away from people who use your love to hurt you. We hugged goodbye at my building, and I carried her words up to my apartment like a gift. Permission I hadn't known I needed. Later, lying in bed, I let myself think about Derek for the first time in weeks. Really think about him. Not as the man who'd hurt me, but as the child I'd raised. Where had I failed? What had I done or not done that created a person capable of such casual cruelty? Or was this even about me? Maybe Derek's cruelty came from somewhere else. Entitlement, social conditioning, some defect I hadn't caused and couldn't have fixed. Maybe I'd done everything right, and he'd still turned out wrong. I'd never know. That was part of letting go, accepting that some questions don't have answers. Some puzzles don't have solutions. My phone buzzed. New email to my secure account from Richard. Vivian, Derek contacted me again. Asked if I could, please just tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I'll do anything. I told him I'd pass along the message, but I couldn't promise you'd respond. So here's me passing it along. Do with it what you want. I stared at the message for a long time. Derek was sorry. After 6 months of consequences, he'd arrived at sorry. Was it genuine? Or was it strategic? Sorry because he was broke. Sorry because therapy told him he should be. Sorry because he wanted something. Did it even matter? I composed 3 different responses, deleted them all, finally wrote simply, Richard, please tell Derek this. I heard his apology. I don't accept it, but I heard it. He should focus on being a better person going forward, not on fixing what he broke with me. That's not repairable. Let him move on. I already have. Hit send before I could second guess. Then I blocked Richard's email too. Wouldn't be needing updates about Derek anymore. That chapter of my life was closed. Time to write new ones. The anniversary arrived quietly. 1 year since Derek had said the words that ended everything. 1 year since I'd disappeared. I marked it by doing something I'd never done before. I booked a trip to Hawaii. First-class flight, beachfront hotel, 7 days of absolutely nothing except whatever I wanted. At the airport, waiting to board, I people-watched. Families traveling together, couples holding hands, teenagers glued to phones, normal people living normal lives with their normal complications. Was I normal now? Or had I become something else? A woman who'd faked poverty for years, then vanished when tested, leaving her only child with nothing. My phone buzzed. The emergency line. I'd kept it active out of practicality, though I'd stopped expecting important calls. Marlene. I thought you should know, she said without preamble. Derek's in the hospital. Suicide attempt. The words hit like ice water. Everything in me went still, cold, focused. When? 2 days ago. Pills and alcohol. His neighbor found him and called 911. He's stable now, in psychiatric hold. Marlene's voice was carefully neutral. His emergency contact was still me. They called from his phone. I went to check on him. Vivian, he asked for you. Kept saying he needed to tell you he was sorry. I closed my eyes. Is he really sorry? Or is he sorry he got caught? Sorry he lost the money? I don't know. Maybe both. Does it matter? It matters if I'm expected to forgive him because he's suffering. Suffering doesn't erase what he did. No one's asking you to forgive him. I'm just telling you what happened. What you do with that information is your choice. After we hung up, I sat with it. Derek had tried to end his life. My son, the baby I'd carried, the child I'd raised, the man who'd wished me dead, had nearly made himself dead when faced with consequences of his own making. I should have felt something. Guilt, maybe. Responsibility. The urge to rush back, to save him, to be the mother who fixed everything. Instead, I felt tired and clear. This was manipulation. Maybe unconscious, maybe instinctive, but manipulation nonetheless. Derek had spent 36 years learning that his pain triggered my rescue. That suffering made him my priority. That crisis erased his accountability. If I went back now, I'd be teaching him that same lesson one more time. Hurt yourself badly enough, and mom comes running. All is forgiven. Money returned. Life restored. I wouldn't do it. Not because I didn't care that he'd suffered, but because going back would be enabling, not helping, would be choosing his destructive patterns over my hard-won freedom. I boarded the plane, ordered champagne, watched the mainland disappear below. Derek would survive this. He was in a hospital, getting help, probably learning actual consequences for the first time in his life. That was good. That was necessary. But I wouldn't be part of his recovery, wouldn't be his motivation or his goal or his unfinished business. He needed to heal himself, for himself, not to get back something he'd lost. Hawaii was everything I needed. Warm water, soft sand, Mai Tais at sunset. I read 3 novels, took a surfing lesson, let a masseuse work tension out of muscles I hadn't known were tight. On day 4, walking the beach at dawn, I met a man named James, ironically same name as my late husband, though this James was nothing like him. Retired teacher, 70 years old, silver hair and kind eyes, here visiting his daughter, who lived in Oahu. We had coffee, then dinner, then spent the next 3 days talking about everything except our past, just 2 people enjoying present tense without the weight of history. You're mysterious, he said our last evening, watching sunset paint the sky impossible colors. Every time I ask about before, you redirect. Before isn't interesting. Now is. Everyone has a before. Mine ended a year ago. I'm working on my after. I smiled at him. Can we just exist in the present tense? For 3 more hours until your flight? Absolutely. We watched the sun disappear and talked about books and travel and whether retirement was everything it promised. When we said goodbye, he kissed my cheek and said, "Whatever you're running from, I hope you find what you're running toward." I already did, I said. It's me. Flying home to Portland, I thought about Derek in a psychiatric hospital, working through whatever had brought him to pills and desperation. Part of me hoped he'd learn, grow, become better. Another part knew that wasn't my responsibility or my concern anymore. I'd given him 36 years. He'd given me cruelty. We were done. The foundation Sarah had helped me establish was thriving. The Vivian Lawrence Foundation for Nursing Excellence had awarded its first scholarships, 5 recipients, all from underprivileged backgrounds, all passionate about healthcare. Their thank you letters were framed in my apartment, reminders that Derek's lost millions were changing lives he'd never know about. His inheritance was educating future nurses. His cruelty had funded compassion. The irony was sharp and satisfying. Back in Portland, I returned to my life. Book club, hospital volunteering, hiking trails, farmers markets, small rhythms that added up to days, weeks, months of contentment. Marlene called again, 2 weeks after Hawaii. He's out of psychiatric hold, in outpatient therapy 3 times a week. Asked me to ask you if you'd consider meeting with him, just once, to talk. No. I told him you'd say that. He asked me to tell you he's not the same person, that he's done serious work, understands what he did, wants to make amends not to get anything, but because you deserve to hear it. Then he can write a letter, send it to Richard. If I ever want to read it, I'll have access. But I'm not meeting him, Marlene. I'm not giving him the closure he thinks he needs. He's really changed, Vivian. I've seen him. He's broken, genuinely remorseful. Good. Broken and remorseful is progress. But that doesn't mean I owe him forgiveness or presence or any part of me anymore. I took a breath. I'm glad he's in therapy. I'm glad he's confronting what he did, but he needs to do that for himself, not for me. I'm done being his motivation or his goal or his unfinished business. I understand. I'll tell him. And Marlene, maybe it's time for you to stop being his messenger. Let him live with the consequences completely. No updates, no go-betweens. Just let it be done. She was quiet. Then, you're right. I'm enabling him by maintaining this connection. Okay, this is the last call. If he asks again, I'll tell him I'm respecting your boundaries by not contacting you anymore. We said goodbye, knowing it might be permanent. Marlene had been witness to my old life, but my new life didn't need witnesses. It needed participants, and she'd always be connected to Derek, to that history, to the woman I'd stopped being. Sometimes freedom required burning more bridges than you'd planned. That night, I wrote Derek a letter I'd never send. Dear Derek, I'm told you tried to harm yourself. I'm glad you survived. I'm glad you're in therapy. I'm glad you're finally confronting the person you became, but I'm not coming back. Not because you don't deserve forgiveness, maybe you do, or will someday, but because I deserve peace more than you deserve closure. I deserve to live without being responsible for your healing. I deserve to be free of the man who wished me dead. You're in pain, I understand, But your pain doesn't obligate my presence. Your growth doesn't require my witness. Your amends don't need my acceptance. Heal yourself, Derek. Become better. Learn from this. But do it for yourself, not for the fantasy of reconciliation with a mother you destroyed. I wish you well, from a distance, permanently. Vivian. I saved the letter in a file I'd probably never open again. It was enough to write it, enough to name the boundary, enough to choose myself one more time. 1 year after vanishing, I was more found than I'd ever been, and Derek was learning that some consequences last forever, that some relationships, once ended, stay ended, that wishing your mother dead costs more than money. It costs the possibility of ever having a mother again. 2 years to the day after Derek's phone call, I stood in front of 200 people at the Portland Convention Center, giving the keynote speech for the Oregon Nurses Association annual conference. Advocacy isn't just for patients, I said into the microphone, my voice steady and strong. Sometimes the person who most needs your advocacy is yourself. Sometimes the most radical thing a nurse can do is choose her own healing. The audience, mostly women, mostly my age or younger, all of them understanding the weight of service and sacrifice, listened with the intensity of people hearing their own story told back to them. I talked about 36 years of putting everyone else first, about the cost of unconditional love given to people who took it for granted, about the moment I'd chosen myself and how terrifying and liberating that had been. I didn't name Derek, didn't mention the money or the disappearance, just talked about boundaries, about the difference between service and servitude, about how you can't pour from an empty cup, but sometimes you have to break the cup entirely and get a new one. Standing ovation, women crying. Afterward, dozens approached to share their own stories, daughters who drained them, partners who diminished them, families who demanded without reciprocating. The same story, infinite variations. How did you do it? A young nurse asked, maybe 30, tears streaming. How did you walk away? I decided I mattered as much as everyone I was sacrificing for. Then I acted like that was true, until it became true. I took her hands. You matter. Your peace matters. Your joy matters. Don't wait until you're 61 to believe it. After the conference, I had dinner with the foundation board, 5 nurses I'd recruited to help distribute scholarships and grants. The Vivian Lawrence Foundation had grown beyond my initial funding. We'd gotten corporate sponsorships, individual donations, even a write-up in Nursing Weekly that brought national attention. We're changing lives, said Brenda, our treasurer. 23 scholarships this year, 15 grants for nurses pursuing advanced degrees. The impact is exponential. Impact Derek would never see. Money he'd lost funding futures he'd never know about. His cruelty creating opportunities for people who understood service as gift, not obligation. Poetry of the highest order. Walking back to my apartment, I'd moved to a larger place in the West Hills, bought not rented because I could. My phone rang. The emergency line I'd kept active out of habit more than necessity. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Then did. Curious. Ms. Lawrence? A woman's voice, professional and careful, speaking. This is Dr. Patricia Huang from Illinois Psychiatric Associates. I'm calling about Derek Carter. I understand he's your son? My heart rate spiked. I'm not in contact with Derek. If this is an emergency, it's not an emergency. He's asked me to reach out on his behalf. He's been in intensive therapy with me for 18 months. Part of his recovery involves making genuine amends to people he's harmed. He's written you a letter. With your permission, I'd like to send it. Why would I want a letter from someone who told me my death would be his perfect birthday gift? Silence. Then, he told me what he said. He's carried it for 2 years. Ms. Lawrence, I'm not asking you to forgive him or reconcile with him. I'm asking if you'd be willing to read his words. What you do with them after is entirely your choice. I stood at my window, overlooking Portland lights, thinking about closure and consequence and the exhausting persistence of the past. Send it to this address, I said, and gave her my P.O. box. But Dr. Huang, make sure Derek understands. Reading his letter doesn't mean I'll respond. Doesn't mean anything except I'm willing to hear what he has to say. That's all. I'll make that clear. Thank you for considering it. The letter arrived 3 days later. Thick envelope, expensive paper, Derek's handwriting on the outside. I let it sit on my kitchen counter for a week, looking at it every day, deciding. Finally, on a Saturday morning with coffee and sunlight, I opened it. Mom, I don't have the right to call you that anymore. I lost that right when I told you I wished you were dead, but I don't know what else to call you. Vivian feels wrong. Ms. Carter feels absurd. So Mom it is, even if I'm not your son anymore in any way that matters. I've been in therapy for 18 months. Real therapy. Not the kind where you show up and expect to be fixed. The kind where you have to look at yourself honestly and admit what you see is ugly. I was ugly, Mom. Am ugly. Maybe still. Working on it. Dr. Huang has me do this exercise where I write down the worst things I've ever done and examine why I did them. Top of that list, telling you your death would be my perfect birthday present. I've written about it probably 50 times, trying to understand where that came from. Here's what I figured out. I was angry at you for being human, for not being perfect, for reminding me that I came from modest circumstances when I was trying to pretend I'd always been the successful lawyer with the nice apartment and impressive career. You were evidence of a past I wanted to erase, and I punished you for existing. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Dr. Huang says that's not the point of amends. The point is acknowledging harm, taking full responsibility, and changing the behavior. I can't change what I said, but I can own it completely and promise I'll never speak to anyone that way again. I know you left me $1 in your will. I know you have millions I never knew about. Marlene confirmed it when I asked directly. Do you know what the worst part is? Not losing the money. Losing you. I'd give anything, to go back to that phone call and say, I'd love dinner, Mom. Thank you for thinking of me. But I can't go back. I can only go forward as someone who destroyed the most important relationship in his life and has to live with that. I'm not asking to see you. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know I understand what I did. I'm sorry. Genuinely, completely sorry. You deserved better than me. You deserve better than this letter. But you also deserve to know that the son who wished you dead learned to wish you were alive, even if he can never be part of that life again. I hope you're happy. I hope you found peace. I hope wherever you are, whoever you've become, you're finally free of the burden I made myself. Derek. I read it 3 times, looking for manipulation, for hidden agenda, for the angle that would reveal this as strategy instead of genuine remorse. Couldn't find it. The letter felt real, broken, honest in ways Derek had never been honest. It didn't change anything, didn't make me want to reconcile or restore relationship or give him access to my life. But it did something I hadn't expected. It gave me permission to stop carrying anger, not forgiveness. Forgiveness required more than a good letter, but release. The ability to let Derek be someone who'd harmed me and learned from it without making his learning my responsibility. I wrote back, 1 page, handwritten. Derek, I read your letter. I believe you're genuinely sorry. I believe you've done work to understand what you did. I'm proud of you for that growth, even if I'm not part of it. But I'm not coming back. Reading your words doesn't change the fact that you destroyed something irreparable. The mother you knew died when you said those words. I'm someone else now, someone happier, freer, more whole than I ever was when you were in my life. That's not punishment. It's truth. You hurt me badly enough that distance became healing. You damaged our relationship badly enough that repair would require me to damage myself. I won't do that. I'm glad you're in therapy. Stay in it. Become the person who'd never say those words to anyone. Learn the lesson that some consequences are permanent. Use that knowledge to treat future people in your life with the care you didn't give me. The money you lost is educating nurses, helping hospitals, changing lives. Your inheritance is doing more good as charity than it ever would have done, making your life more comfortable. That's the only justice I need. I wish you well, Derek, from a distance, permanently. Stop looking for me. Stop hoping for reconciliation. Let me be dead to you, the way you wish. Then both of us can finally move on. Vivian Lawrence. I sent it via Dr. Huang with instructions. Please give this to Derek in a therapy session where he'll have support processing it. And please make clear, this is closure, not opening. This is goodbye. 2 weeks later, Dr. Huang called. I gave Derek your letter. He took it hard, cried for most of the session, but I think it was what he needed to hear. The finality of it, the permission to stop hoping and start accepting. How is he? Broke. Working as a paralegal now. Lost his law license over the ethics violations and debt, living in a studio apartment, starting over at 37, but healthier than when I met him, more honest, more humble. Good, I meant it. I hope he builds something better than what he lost. He asked me to tell you, he'll stop looking, he'll stop hoping, he'll let you be gone. It's the last thing he can give you, the gift of his complete absence. After we hung up, I sat with the strange piece of true ending. Not the forced ending of my disappearance, but mutual acknowledgement that we were done, that Derek accepted it, that I could finally, fully move forward without looking over my shoulder. That night, I celebrated. Not Derek's pain. I'd never wanted him to suffer, but my freedom. Complete, unqualified freedom. Called my book club, suggested we meet for dinner instead of discussing books. 8 women showed up to a restaurant I loved, and I told them everything. The whole story. Derek, the money, the disappearance, the 2 years of hiding. You're a fucking legend, said Linda, raising her wine glass. You gave him exactly what he asked for and made sure it cost him everything. I gave myself what I needed, I corrected. Derek was just collateral damage. To collateral damage, someone toasted. We drank to freedom, to consequences, to women who chose themselves, to the radical act of refusing to be diminished by people who should have loved us better. Walking home through Portland streets I'd come to love, I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, folding laundry, getting ready for a phone call that would detonate everything. I missed her sometimes. The mother who'd loved unconditionally, but I didn't want to be her again. I liked who I'd become, Vivian Lawrence, woman who knew her worth. Derek had wanted me dead. Instead, he'd killed the version of me that would have kept accepting his cruelty. And in that death, I'd finally learned to live. 3 years after disappearing, I received an invitation that stopped me mid-sip of morning coffee. The American Nurses Association requests the honor of your presence at the annual Excellence Awards. The Vivian Lawrence Foundation has been selected to receive the Humanitarian Impact Award for its transformative work in nursing education and healthcare accessibility. National recognition, media attention. My name, my new name, broadcast to thousands of nurses across the country, including Illinois. Including anyone Derek might know who'd happen to be watching. My first instinct was to decline. Safety meant invisibility. Awards meant exposure. But then I thought, why was I still hiding? Derek had stopped looking months ago, accepted our ending, was rebuilding his own life. I'd spent 3 years in self-imposed witness protection from a threat that had dissolved. Maybe it was time to stop hiding and start living fully visible. I called the ANA and accepted. The ceremony was in Washington, D.C. in 6 weeks. Black tie, televised, the kind of event that marked arrivals and legitimacy. I'd need a dress, a speech, courage to stand in front of cameras that might somehow reach back to Chicago. But I'd earned this. The foundation had distributed over $2 million in scholarships and grants, had changed hundreds of lives, had turned Derek's cruelty into tangible good. I deserved to be recognized for that, even if it meant risk. Shopping for a gown in Portland's boutiques, I tried on dresses that cost more than I'd spent on clothes in entire years of my previous life. Settled on deep emerald green that made my skin glow, that announced presence instead of apologizing for space. You look like royalty, the saleswoman said. Special occasion? I'm receiving an award for a foundation I built from my son's inheritance that he lost through his own cruelty. The words came out before I could filter them. She blinked, then smiled slowly. That's the most badass thing I've heard all month. You wear this dress like the crown it is. The weeks leading up to DC were busy. Media interviews about the foundation. I kept my personal story vague, focused on impact, coordinating with board members who'd attend, practicing a speech that wouldn't reveal too much, but would honor the work. 3 days before the event, Sarah Chen called. Vivian, I have news. Derek got married. The information landed strange and neutral. Married? To a woman named Kendra Willows. She's a social worker, works with homeless populations. They met in a therapy group, apparently. She's been sober for 5 years. He's been in treatment for narcissistic personality disorder. The wedding was small. Marlene sent me a photo. Why would Marlene send you a photo? Because she knows I'm still your financial advisor and figured you'd want to know. Sarah paused. He looks different, Vivian. Softer, like someone who's actually lived through consequences. I'm glad. Genuinely. I hope he's happy. I hope she's good for him. You're not upset? Why would I be? I let him go 3 years ago. He gets to have a life. It just won't include me. I paused. Did Marlene say if he mentions me? She said he talks about you in past tense. My mother, not my mom. Like honoring what was without pretending you still exist to him. Kendra knows the whole story, apparently. Knows what he said, what he lost, why you're gone. She told him everyone deserves a second chance, but no one is owed a third. I think I'd like Kendra, I said, surprising myself. Me too. Want to see the photo? No. Let him have his new beginning without me witnessing it. That's the kindest thing I can do. After we hung up, I sat with the knowledge that Derek had moved on, married someone who knew his worst and chose him anyway, was building something new from his ruins. Good. That's what I'd wanted for him. Growth, change, a future that didn't require my participation or forgiveness. We'd both moved on. Both built new lives from the ashes of what we'd destroyed. That was the happiest possible ending. The DC ceremony was everything I'd feared and hoped for. Ballroom glittering with chandeliers, 500 nurses in evening wear, cameras everywhere. I sat at a table with my foundation board, hands shaking slightly, trying to remember I deserved to be here. When they called my name for the award, I walked to that stage like I was walking into my future. Took the crystal trophy, stood at the microphone, looked at 500 faces and cameras that would broadcast this to thousands more. 3 years ago, I began. I was given an unexpected gift, complete freedom. Someone I loved told me my death would make their life perfect. Instead of dying, I disappeared, started over, built this. I told the story, not names, not details that would identify Derek, but the shape of it. Son who wished mother dead, mother who vanished with hidden fortune, fortune repurposed to help others. The Vivian Lawrence Foundation exists because of cruelty, but it thrives because of choice. I chose to transform pain into purpose, chose to take money that was meant to enable entitlement and use it to empower excellence, chose myself, finally, at 61 years old. The room was silent, hanging on every word. If you're here tonight and you're carrying the weight of people who diminish you, who use your love as a weapon, who tell you your worth is tied to their needs, I want you to know you can choose yourself. You can walk away. You can take what was meant to destroy you and build something that heals instead. I held up the award. This belongs to every nurse who ever put herself last, whoever poured from an empty cup, whoever wondered if it was selfish to choose her own peace. It's not selfish, it's survival. And from survival comes everything else. Standing ovation, 500 people on their feet. I stood at that podium and let myself feel it. Victory, vindication, visible proof that choosing myself had been right. After dozens of nurses approached with stories, tears, thanks. You gave me permission, one said. I'm leaving my daughter's house this weekend, taking my retirement and starting over at 68. Good, I told her. You deserve to live before you die. The foundation's work exploded after that night. Media coverage brought donations, attention, partnerships. Within 3 months, we'd tripled our budget. Within 6 months, we'd expanded to 10 states. Derek's lost millions had become a movement, and I had become someone I barely recognized from the woman folding laundry 3 years ago, taking a phone call that would end everything and begin everything. Flying back to Portland, I looked out at clouds and thought about Derek, married to Kendra, rebuilding his life without me. Thought about the woman I'd been, the woman I'd become, the vast distance between them. Both of us had died that day, his old self and mine. Both of us had been reborn into something different. His curse had become my liberation. His cruelty had funded my purpose. His wish for my death had taught me how to live. That was justice more complete than any revenge could have been. 5 years after I vanished, I received a letter forwarded through Dr. Huang, Derek's handwriting, careful and controlled. Vivian, I'm writing to tell you something I need you to know, even though you don't owe me the reading of it. Kendra is pregnant. We're having a daughter, due in 4 months. When we found out, my first thought was, I need to tell my mother. My second thought was, I don't have a mother anymore, because I killed that relationship with 6 words. I'm going to be a father. I'm terrified I'll be to my daughter what I was to you, ungrateful, cruel, someone who takes love for granted until it's gone. Kendra says the fact that I'm afraid of that means I won't be. I hope she's right. Dr. Huang says I'm not supposed to ask anything of you, that this is just information sharing, not request making. So I'm not asking. I'm just saying, you're going to be a grandmother. There's a child coming who shares your blood, even if she'll never know you. I wish she could. I wish I could tell her about the woman who raised me alone, who worked herself exhausted to give me opportunities, who loved me even when I didn't deserve it. But that's not your responsibility anymore. I'm going to try to be the father I should have been the son. That's all I can do. Try to break the cycle of taking love for granted. Try to deserve what I'm given. I thought you should know. I don't expect a response. But if you ever want to meet her, not me, not Kendra, just her, the door is open. On your terms. Always. Derek. I sat with the letter for 3 days. A grandchild. A daughter carrying my blood, my genes, my legacy forward into a future I wouldn't witness. Did I want to meet her? Did I want to walk back into Derek's orbit, even tangentially, even carefully? The old me would have said yes immediately, would have seen this as olive branch, as redemption, as love overcoming hurt. The new me knew better. Meeting this child would mean opening a door I'd closed for good reason, would mean Derek having access, however limited, to my life again, would mean complicated boundaries and negotiations, and the constant risk of old patterns reasserting themselves. I didn't want that. I wanted the peace I'd built, the life I'd created, the freedom that came from complete separation. But I also wanted this child to know, someday, that she'd had a grandmother who'd loved her father enough to let him go, who'd chosen herself but hadn't chosen cruelty, who'd built something good from something painful. I wrote back, Derek, congratulations on your daughter. I hope she brings you joy and teaches you the kind of love that transforms rather than diminishes. I won't be meeting her, not because I don't wish her well. I do, profoundly. But because I've built a life that doesn't include you, and including her would inevitably include you. I'm not willing to risk my peace for even the most beautiful reason, but I want her to have something from me. I've set up a trust in her name, $500,000, invested conservatively, accessible to her when she turns 18. It's not conditional on anything, not good grades or good behavior or acknowledging me. It's just there, waiting, proof that someone who never knew her loved her enough to ensure she had options. Tell her about me if you want. Tell her I was complicated, that we had an impossible relationship, that I chose myself when choosing her grandfather would have destroyed me. Or tell her nothing. That's your choice. But make sure she knows this. She deserves to be loved well. By parents who see her as gift, not burden. By people who value her presence, not just her utility. If you can give her that, if you can love her the way you didn't love me, then something good came from all of this. This is goodbye, Derek. Final and complete. I'm not interested in updates about her life or photos or carefully managed distance relationship. I made my choice 5 years ago. I'm reaffirming it now. Live well, raise her well, become the person who'd never say what you said to anyone, especially not to her. That's my last gift to you, the blessing to move forward without me watching. Vivian, I sent it through Dr. Huang with instructions. This is the last communication. Tell Derek the door is closed, locked, and I've moved to a house without that door. No more letters, no more updates, just complete mutual absence. 3 weeks later, Sarah confirmed the trust was established. $500,000 waiting for a child I'd never meet, from a grandmother who existed only in documentation and DNA. My foundation board asked if I'd considered succession planning. Who would run things when I was gone? Gone? I laughed. I'm 66 years old and hiking 10 miles a week. I'm not going anywhere. But the question made me think about legacy. What I'd leave behind when death, the real kind, not the symbolic disappearance kind, finally came. I had no children, no grandchildren, no family beyond people I'd chosen rather than been born to. My money would go to the foundation, growing it beyond my lifetime. My name would be attached to scholarships helping nurses I'd never meet. That was enough, more than enough, because I'd learned the hardest lesson. Family isn't blood or obligation or people who share your DNA. Family is who shows up, who chooses you back, who treats your love as gift, not entitlement. Derek had failed that test, but I'd passed a different one. The test of choosing myself, of building meaning from pain, of refusing to be diminished by someone else's cruelty. 5 years after vanishing, I was more visible than I'd ever been, running a national foundation, speaking at conferences, helping hundreds of people build lives of purpose. I'd published a book, Choosing Yourself, A Nurse's Journey from Service to Self, that had become required reading in nursing schools across the country. I'd taken Derek's worst moment and made it my origin story, taken his cruelty and transformed it into something that helped thousands. That was the ultimate victory. Not revenge, transformation. On the 5th anniversary of my disappearance, my book club threw me a party. 20 women now, the original 8 plus dozens more who'd joined over the years, drawn by reputation and word of mouth. To Vivian, Linda toasted, who proved that 61 isn't too late to start over, that some doors need closing, that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. To second acts, I corrected, and third acts, and however many acts we get before the curtain falls. We drank and laughed and told stories, and I looked around at faces of women who knew me as Vivian Lawrence, who'd never met Vivian Carter, who had no idea about Derek beyond the vague outline I'd shared. This was my family now, chosen, earned, built from shared values instead of shared blood. Later, walking home through Portland streets I'd learned better than the Chicago neighborhoods I'd left behind, I thought about Derek holding his daughter, teaching her to walk, to read, to navigate a world that would demand so much from her. I hoped he'd be good to her, hoped she'd never hear him say her presence was a burden, hoped he'd learned enough to break the cycle, but I'd never know. And that was okay. Some stories ended with reconciliation. This one ended with separation. Both people alive, both people transformed, both people moving forward in completely different directions. That wasn't tragedy. That was two people choosing their own paths when the shared path became impossible. I'd given Derek the greatest gift he'd asked for, my absence, my death as his mother, so complete he could finally live without the weight of my expectations or disappointment. And he'd given me, unintentionally, unwillingly, the greatest gift possible, the push I'd needed to finally choose myself, to stop performing sacrifice and start living authentically. We'd both gotten what we'd asked for, just not in any way either of us had expected. At home, I pulled out my journal, the one I'd kept since moving to Portland, filled with 5 years of thoughts and growth and the slow building of a self I could be proud of. On the last page I wrote, 5 years ago, my son said his life would be perfect if I died. Today, I'm more alive than I've ever been, and he's learning to live without the mother he wished away. We're both better off. Sometimes love means letting go so completely that absence becomes its own kind of gift. I gave him what he asked for, and in doing so, I gave myself what I'd needed for 61 years. Permission to be more than a mother. Permission to be a person. That's the greatest gift. Not what I left behind, but what I found when I finally walked away. I closed the journal, turned off the light, and fell asleep in my chosen city, in my chosen life, as my chosen self. Derek had wanted me dead. Instead, I'd learned to live, and that was the ending both of us needed, even if only one of us would ever understand why. Thank you very much for watching. Share with those who also like stories, subscribe, and tell me in the comments if you liked my story. Cheers.